When we choose where we live, we kind of choose the location first. Like, where do I want to live? What part of, by the bay, by the beach, in the mountains? We choose where we want to live. We choose that in consideration where we want to work. And then third, we think about community. And that is completely and totally backwards. The first thing we should be picking is community. That should be the first decision point. Who are the people that I'm going to be in community with, in relationship with, where I live? That should be the first choice, and then the economics, and then maybe the lifestyle that's around you. But the people should be the first criteria we're using when picking where we live.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although I know it's uncommon. So Israel is very uncommon at that stage, because like the way that we see things is very different, and our experience in life is very different, and the way that we are as a nation is very different. So I cannot really compare. I feel like in many other places, people are really lonely. So I have a cousin who lives in London, for example, and she left London to live in the suburbs. And she told me that when you live in London, I never lived there, I just visited, that you feel so alone, you're so isolated. And socially, you feel like, I know people, but you need to set a time, like a few months from now, we'll have time to just catch up. And it doesn't make sense to me what everybody's doing. Like, they're working and not watching Netflix. They don't have time for each other.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Instead of like consuming another series, binging something on Netflix, wouldn't it make sense just to go out for a coffee? If you're both in London, it will take an hour in the tube. That's it, right? And people are like, it feels that they are so used to being in their own world, in their hobbies. I'm just trying to imagine their daily lives. And I don't understand why people decide that. I understand that it's easy just to go back from work and just open Netflix.
The reason is work, is scheduling meetings is work. And so in a city like New York, it's too dense. So because it is so dense, and because there's so many people, even living in a city block, there might be 10,000 people. You go, I can't know all these 10,000 people, even in a city block. So you just don't. So we need a much more moderate density. A city like Venice is probably a really good example about how dense it should be for us, so we can actually get our mind around knowing people. I met a tour guide in Venice, and I asked her how long it took for her to get from her apartment to the dock where she picked us up. And she said between 15 minutes and an hour and a half. And I go, Venice isn't that big. I've walked the whole island. How could it be either 15 minutes or an hour and a half? And she said, well, it depends on the time of day and whether my friends are out. So if her friends are out, she has to stop and have all these conversations along the way before she gets to the dock. And that's the way it should be, where it's this serendipitous conversations and engagement. We should be able to walk out of our door and see a community of people who was already there. That way we don't have to plan it in advance. It just naturally is always there happening. So that's the big challenge for us in meeting with people, is we have to schedule it and coordinate their time frame and our frames and emails and the rest of it, versus just walking outside of our door and there always being another group of people who we can be in community with.
If you are more committed to national unity than partisanship, please check out my book, The Second Civil War, A Citizen's Guide to Healing Our Fractured Nation. My book will challenge you to improve your relationships with friends and family. Click the link in the description below.